My name is Dr. Kara Martin, and today I'll be sharing a little bit about my dissertation, the study itself, and some of the outcomes. The title of my dissertation was Transgender and Gender Nonconforming Alumni Sense of Belonging in Christian Higher Education, an Interpretative Phenomenological Analysis. There are about 170 CCCU member institutions. CCCU stands for Council of Christian Colleges and Universities. So it's a consortium of Christian universities that all have a commitment to traditional theology around sexuality and gender. Basically, each one of these member institutions has to, as a membership requirement, uphold the Christian belief that marriage is between one man and one woman. Contrary to what might be assumed on the surface level, trans and gender diverse students do enroll, do exist on these CCCU campuses. And we know from some surveys that they are about 2% of the total student body, or about 10,500 students. So that's pretty significant. When you think about a trans and gender diverse student population, you might not think that they would be a significant portion of the Christian college student body, but they are. The literature review, there's only three studies before mine that talked about the experiences of trans students on Christian campuses as separate from their LGBT peers. But we know from these studies primarily three big things. We know that they experience a low sense of belonging on campus. We know that they experience a high level of psychological distress. And we know that they might experience religiosity as a protective factor or a benefiting factor to their college experience. So I was really curious about this problem that little is known about how these students at Christian colleges experience belonging and its long-term impact on their spiritual identity. Some of these things have been measured quantitatively from Mark Yarhouse and his team over at Wheaton, but quantitative research cannot explain or understand the lived experience of belonging or exclusion, nor can it explain the long-term impact of whether or not they felt like they belonged on campus. So my study was really interested in finding out those things. In fact, I wrote my purpose of the study to be to explore how transgender and gender diverse alumni of CCCU institutions interpreted and ascribed meaning to their experiences of belonging. I was really curious to study alumni who persisted to graduation and could reflect on their experiences in college and be able to talk about how those experiences shaped who they became as alumni. And because of the elements, the threads that I pulled through the literature review, I really wanted to focus on sense of belonging. Did they belong or did they feel excluded on campus? Stress and resilience. What factors existed within their undergraduate experience that were stressful, and what things led to them actually persisting to graduation in spite of the stress? And then lastly, spiritual formation. I was really curious about what is the trajectory of Christian, trans, and gender diverse adults, and do these alumni describe their Christian college experience as something that contributed to their faith that they still hold as an adult, or something that detracted from their faith and eventually distanced them from it? So then my research question, I had a couple sub questions, but I was curious about how students at these institutions made meaning of their experiences, particularly when it came to belonging, stress and resilience, and long-term spiritual development. And each one of my sub research questions just dove into one of those at a time. So it's helpful to describe a little bit more about my study. It was an IPA study, which is an ideographic double hermeneutic strategy to understand the meaning made of identity-laden experiences. I ended up with nine participants, and I recorded Zoom interviews that lasted about 70 to 90 minutes, and that were semi-structured. So I scripted every question and every possible follow-up question, let the conversation go wherever it was going to go, but used the scripted questions to guide it. I was able to auto transcribe those interviews through Zoom and even did a member check quickly thereafter. And for every single participant, I was able to go less than 7 days from interview to member check, which is awesome. The analysis then is just a bunch of reading and rereading these transcripts, condensing them, and eventually building up themes that work for each participant. So here are the nine participants, a variety of different pronoun usage and gender identities. I collected information about whether or not they were affiliated with an LGBTQ plus club, if their campus offered that or not. And then I collected their graduation year. So mostly recent grads. I've got a 2019 grad and a 2014 grad. Other than that, everybody was 2021 or sooner. And I also got a geographic diverse group. So several in the Northwest, several in the Midwest, and then one in the Southwest, one in the Southeast. So a pretty good representation just nationally of all of the different institutions within the CCCU. What I found were three main themes as kind of an arc of how they experienced belonging. So, entering college, they idealized belonging. They were told through the admissions process or through their family, what have you, that they were going to belong on a Christian campus and they should look forward to that experience. So, they entered college expecting to belong. Then they arrived on campus and realized they didn't really. Maybe the admissions department made false promises. Maybe they realized their family didn't know them as well as they thought they did. For whatever reason, they would arrive on campus and come up against systemic things that they uh, just demonstrated to them, like that they did not belong. I had one participant talking about a male transgender participant who talked about living in a female residence hall, feeling illegal just by his presence there. Then they navigated this systemic exclusion through a couple different of strategies. They may have been really guarded and not shared their identity with people on campus. They may have been strategic in who they shared their identities with, but the felt reality for each one of these participants was that they did not belong on campus and they essentially felt alienated from the student body and the institution itself. And then finally, about half spiritually displaced and the other half spiritually reconstructed. So about half of participants were able to take their experience and say, okay, maybe I didn't see a version of Christianity that I loved when I was in college. Maybe I experienced some hypocrisy, but I can reconstruct my spirituality to fit myself and my identity. Others said that was enough for me. If this is who Christians are, then I don't want any part of it. But all participants were able to, in their vocation, bring about or were actively seeking belonging within their communities, whether that was for themselves or they were looking to offer it to others. And this just describes the few participants who lost their faith, the few participants who kept their faith. It's an interesting study. If you have more questions, this is a really short amount of time. Please feel free to email me, coach.kara.martin@gmail.com, or on my LinkedIn handle there. Thank you.